Appreciate everybody for coming. We're going to have an exciting evening tonight. Julene Berger has offered to give our opening prayer. So, Julene, if you could make your way up here, appreciate it.
Our dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful to meet here tonight. Grateful for the venue. Grateful for Doug Toomer and his wife's work in setting this situation up for us. Grateful for the meeting place, for the people who've come. Our speakers, we are so grateful for their efforts in going over to Ukraine and helping the refugees and scoping out the situation there in that area of the world. We are sorrowful, dear Father in heaven, for the strife and the chaos and contention which exists. And we ask for thy guidance to be able to see how we should assess the situation. We ask for wisdom, for strength to be able to see the truth. That is what we want, dear Heavenly Father, is we want to know the truth. And we are grateful for this hour to discuss that and to see what we can do as citizens of this nation and of our state of Idaho to prevent things that may corrupt our good free system from happening here. Bless our speakers tonight, that they will be able to give us a good, fair assessment of what's happening and help us to welcome them with open arms, and wilt thou please bless them in their efforts and ours as we fight for the freedoms which thou dost give to us. We say this humbly in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jolene. Everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Just a couple of quick announcements. Tomorrow night we're going to have our monthly Liberty Dinner, and we still have some openings. It's actually going to be pretty exciting. We have several local candidates that are going to be there speaking, and it's an opportunity for you to get in and give them a hard time, ask them the hard questions, and I always challenge us to do that. Currently, and it seems like I keep getting called to say, can we come or can I come to it? So currently, tomorrow at our Liberty Dinner, we're having Randy Neal. He's actually running for Bonneville County Prosecuting Attorney. I'm giving him a couple of minutes. We'll have Darnell Shipp. He's running for representative in District 31, Seat B. Keith Newberry, running for senator in District 32. Nick Christiansen, running for representative in District 32, Seat A. Brian Schultz, running for Senate, District 33. Chad Christensen, running for representative, District 35, Seat B. And Doug Toomer, senator, running for Senate in District 35. So if you'd like to come and hear these people, we can still sign up. There's a little bit of time still to make room for you. So appreciate you doing that. The cost is $35 a plate, but they do feed you decently, and it's a good time to actually get to know the candidates and give them a hard time. Second thing, a week from today, I don't know how many people know this, but there's a gentleman named Flint Christensen is also running against Mike Simpson, and he's running for Congress, District 2. So he will be here next week, and we need to come and listen to what he has to say and give him a hard time. Ask him the hard questions. It's really important. All these elections, and especially this election, in my heart, is very important for all of us. So we need to come and pay attention. With that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Bill Hazen. Bill, actually, I want everybody to give Bill a big hand because come on, Billy, he was the one who contacted me and said that Will was coming back and Paul was back and introduced. So I'm going to turn the mic over to him and let him introduce them.
Thank you, Doug. As Doug mentioned, I'm Bill from the Wealth of Health here in Idaho Falls. And many of you know I was born in Ukraine, in Odessa, and and Odessa got its first taste of bombing this last Sunday. So very, very near and dear to my heart. Regardless where you stand on the politics of the war, and we've heard all kinds of conspiracies, who's at fault, the human toll is undeniable. You've got about 40 million people in Ukraine population, 10 million have been displaced, 4 million have crossed the border, so they're officially refugees. There's probably a lot more. And many more will be coming as destruction just continues and people don't want to get holed up in some places in Ukraine. So Neil Larson had me on the radio on the 26th, I think, of February, asking my opinion, and I was wrong. I didn't think Putin was ever going to go in, but nonetheless. And ran into Will in the hallway of the station, and many of you know Will Kesley, who sits in for Neil when Neil is out of the studio. Will said, I want to go to Poland. I have my son, and we're like, okay. And 2 days later, he was on the ground in Poland, which is incredible. 2 days. So that was day 4 after the war broke. So Will spent a couple of weeks there, then he rotated back out, and Paul rotated in. And even if you're engaged and you're a political junkie, I thought this would be very special to hear from the 2 guys who spent combined about 4 weeks on the Polish-Ukrainian border helping these refugees. If anybody wants to contribute, and we've been asked this, who do we donate, who do you trust? These guys will tell you that they don't see too many Red Cross people there, they don't see too many big boys there at the border, but Sandhill Stations, Sandhill Gives,
Sandhill Rescue.
SandhillRescue.com has collected close to 30 grand, and what these guys were doing is using that money to rent vehicles, pay for gas, buy hotels for some of the families, get them bus tickets, get them train tickets, whatever it is to get them off the border into the European destinations, and they will tell you a lot more about it. So with that, without any further ado, Will and Paul and you guys can tag team and whatever. And if you guys have questions, ask them right as you go. Don't wait to the end of the talk.
Thanks, Bill. And by the way, Bill is one of my heroes because early on he helped it become possible for us to get down there. He donated a lot of airline miles very quickly in the campaign so we could help keep the money on the ground for the refugees, and he helped send people over to Portland. So Bill, thank you very, very much. So Paul, I guess we'll just kind of freelance this thing. What do you say, right? Paul and I didn't get a chance to meet each other before we went. He got there as I was leaving, and I will tell you, one of the cool things that happens on something like this is that the first time we saw each other, he's like my best friend, and we have these beautiful things in common, and I assure you, he and I'll be best friends forever. It's just something you get when you're on the ground like that. So we have never done the presentation. I just thrown some pictures in, he's thrown some pictures in, and so bear with us. You guys are the first to kind of play around. I know you give us some forgiveness if it plays the wrong way or whatever the case may be. But we dearly want to thank you for coming for so many reasons, but mostly because I know you're here because you care, and it's important to you that we try to do more. And we hopefully will share with you some stories and some things that went on and some things we're doing and some of the things we still need to do. But I will tell you that 100% of what I saw when I was on the ground, and I think, Paul, you're going to agree with this? I think there's a mic up here, by the way. Yep. Okay, come on. Is that we expected we'd get there and there'd be the Red Cross, and there would be UNICEF. In fact, there was a sign from UNICEF, and it said, sorry, we're not here. Honestly, I was like, where are all these guys? We got to the border, and it was just a bunch of people like me and you. Just somebody grabbed a van, so we just showed up. So it was just as grassroots as you could get. And I just sat in awe of the humanity I saw from just the general public. There were no governments involved. I mean, the Polish government was going crazy trying to stay on top of it. Bless their hearts. They've taken the brunt of this thing, and the Polish people have. But it was just everybody like me and you, donating to causes and just getting everybody going. And it was inspiring. It gave me hope. We don't need a government to solve this problem. Honestly, we can do it. We don't need it. And so this is what we have to do. We have to get the message out and invite people to come help and step in and bring goodness to all the people that are coming out of Ukraine. And this is not going away anytime soon, y'all. The refugee thing on the border is the immediate crisis, but now we got the problem with 4 million people in Europe with no jobs. They want jobs. They've got no apartments. They're living in people's homes. I mean, it compounds and compounds, but they're amazingly resilient. And I know, Paul, you and I both, I got a letter today from one of my dear little families that we ran to Croatia, if you can imagine. It's a 14-hour drive. But it was the only place in the world they could go, except sit on the border, which they had for days. And she keeps me updated on what's going on. Her husband and her son are currently fighting on that southeastern border, and it's not pretty there. And so I've been keeping in touch with her every couple of days. Is everybody still okay? Is everybody still okay? She's I got pictures of other family members of hers that were lying in the street. So, it's real, and these are real people. I would tell you, if they were here tonight, you would not recognize them as being anything different than the rest of us. Sometimes we look at refugees, we think, they're people that live in the hills or whatever. They are just me and you, and 99.9% of them are women with children. I saw 2 men, just women and children, and a lot of young children and young mothers. Let me just kind of set some groundwork for you a little bit. So we ended up in Poland because at the time that was the only border that was really effective. You have Hungary and you have Slovakia and you had other areas. They weren't really up and kind of set up for it yet. Poland just was like, we're here, but just let them come in. But when I got there, it was the wild, wild west. I mean, it was not real organized. It was just people flooding off the trains and coming in, and these are the different borders that we would work. The main one down here called Medica, you can see this one, that was the main one. They'd have 514,000. That was a few weeks ago, but that was the main one. And then we started branching off to the other ones. And it was fascinating to watch the different dynamics, especially like in the middle of the night, things got crazy. Around midnight, the refugee place would just pile with people, and that was because everybody was trying to get there in the middle of the night. One of the reports you're not getting is how many trains were shot up, how many bus drivers are dead. I have a family here we'll talk about that walked for 3 days. And I say families, I'm just meaning a mother and children in this case, because their bus driver had been shot and killed. And 23 people on the bus weren't injured because the bus crashed. And so they walked for 3 days straight. No food, no water. 15 degrees outside. Incredibly heartbreaking. Anyways, that's kind of the borderline with Ukraine. Now, we've asked, was it dangerous there? It wasn't, I don't know, Paul, you actually went into Ukraine. It wasn't dangerous for you, was it?
No. I went into the very west side of Ukraine. The farthest east I went was Lviv, and I have some pictures of what it looks like there. But Lviv was bombed when President Biden spoke from Poland, and the reason Lviv was chosen was because it's the closest large city of 2 million people. That was the closest to the border with Poland, and so Putin was trying to make
out of it.
Yeah.
The closest we did to get bombed on the border was 4 miles. 4 miles off the border, they were getting shelled on one evening. And we knew they were getting shelled because the GPS system all went dead. And I'm a pilot and I can tell you exactly what's going on. As soon as I saw the GPS going crazy, I'm like, are they shelling Poland now? Because the government will shut down our GPS system and they'll scramble it to keep the missiles from logging on it and using it as a guidance system. The Russians have one and the United States has one, and they would scramble it. And sure enough, that was the first night they started bombing on the border, right? Just here's an introduction. That was our boat, and we had to go get all the members off the Titanic in our little vans. We felt so small. I will tell you, one of the most heartbreaking things will ever happen to you is you show up at a border in the middle of the night. We don't know anything that's going on. We just show up, and you'll see some pictures here in a minute. And the first thing that I was greeted with was a child they were trying to resuscitate who had died from exposure. And nothing sets you up for that. And it happened because a mom had laid down to get some sleep. She'd been up for days. And while she was asleep, the baby died from exposure. And you get woken up to the reality of just how difficult this really is when it's like in 15, 18 degrees outside, and they've been in it for days. They'll spend days just standing in a line at the border. I'll play a little clip here. This is, just to give you some background, this is a clip that Fox did on my son.
Tonight, we hear from a Utah man who has made his way to Poland to help Ukrainians after they cross the border. He shared with Fox 13 News reporter Aaron Cox what he's experiencing and seeing, and though he's been helping Ukrainians, he tells Aaron they've left him with lessons he will never forget. Say hello, America.
Hello, America.
Pretty good. That's good.
These smiles on the faces of Ukrainian kids.
Yes, from Ukraine.
Kids who have seen more crisis these past few weeks than most. They crossed from Ukraine to Poland, where they met a group of volunteers approved by the Polish government.
Yeah, it's just a group of guys. Clive posted on his Facebook saying, "Hey, I want to do this. Who wants to join?" And by the time we all landed in Prague, there was 5 of us.
They call themselves the Happy Band.
Hey, everybody. We're almost to a town called Medika.
Michael Kesley, a student at Brigham Young University, joined his friends in renting vans to help shuttle refugees from the border to hotels. Homes offered up by families for them to stay in.
I'm seeing a lot of cold women and children that are just exhausted.
Many have left behind fathers, brothers, and husbands in Ukraine to fight the war. They're tired, but Michael says they're resilient.
The refugee that I spoke to today, I told her that in the U.S., and the people that I knew, we were all standing behind Ukraine. She said that meant the world to her. She said, we've decided, as if we're one mind and one heart, that we have not lost and we will not lose.
They use Google Translate to talk with the refugees, as they often drive for hours together across the country.
The whole trip, we were just passing the phone back and forth, asking each other questions and telling jokes.
There are countless stories, years of memories made from moments. One in particular came when Michael was trying to help a family of 6 find a stroller.
We went across the street to a little shopping center. I went up to this woman that was selling some meats and cheese and ice cream there. And do you know where we can buy a baby stroller? And she looked past me at the family and kind of looked back at me hopelessly, like I don't know. So we turned to go, and she said, wait, and she turned around and grabbed this enormous chunk of jerky and wrapped it up in paper and handed it to the kids, and then went back and grabbed some ice cream cones and handed them to the kids.
That kindness is what has strengthened Michael and his band, and the refugees they're helping.
This woman didn't know where we could find a stroller. She couldn't provide housing. She couldn't provide a job. She couldn't provide a lot of these big things, but she could give what she had, and that was her love. And I think that's been the most touching thing that I've learned while being here.
Yes. Michael has been there since March 5th, and he returns home this Wednesday. He says their Happy Band will keep going, though, and they're collecting donations as well as volunteers. We'll link you up to that information on our website, fox13now.com. In studio, Aaron Cox, Fox 13 News, Utah.
One thing about that story, that's my son, by the way, he's been there now twice, is that family is a family he picked up when he was going down the highway. And you're going to hear a lot of this today, and I hope all of you are okay with the conversations regarding God and spiritual things, because it was a most incredibly spiritual experience of my life. And I think, Paul, you're going to agree, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm going to have Paul come up here by me. I don't want him to be my partner in crime here. Come on up, brother. It's okay. They don't hurt. They're friendly. But that family, he just driving down the road, didn't need gas, but he thought, I'm going to pull off, just top off my tank. He pulls into this gas station. There's this family hopelessly working on their car, and it's that family. And he just goes over to say, hello, can I help you with something? And it turns out they're refugees. And in a bad place, right? They're trying to go to Austria. And so he's like, of course, that's why I pulled off today. What can I do for you? And next thing you know, he's driving them to Austria. And ended up getting some families over there that invited him in, took him in, gave him a job. He called me to cry. It's like that, the kindness of people along the way, just everybody, just find a way to help along the way. So, this is the border when we first got there. These are the tents I was referring to that so people could go into for some help or some sleep. And then the bus. None of these tents are government sponsored. They're all just individuals. I met people from all over the world and all over the United States who were doing the same thing that Will and I. They just saw a need, and there were people there from Israel, just from all over that had just put up tents. A group from Britain, we just call them the Brits. They made the best brick oven pizza. They'd make new pizza and just stick it out as the refugees were coming down to feed them. There was another group that made lots of food, that they just hot soup for people as they came across the border. But this pathway was just full of tents, none of them government organized, all just individuals coming from countries to help these refugees. You see in the buses, they're just full. Now that bus line, that night I was taking video to send to a large organization that wanted to know how many people were coming to the border. And that night was the night that the night after they shelled the border. And so nobody was coming on the trains because they were shooting up all the trains and stuff. So it was a really kind of a slow night that night, but it gives you a good idea of the chaos that's going on. And you can see the children, they're all 3, 4, 5 years old. But the line to get on a bus, to get off the border into town about 5 miles away to get to the refugee camp, which is much better, would take anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. And they would just stand in that line, holding babies, never complaining, never getting upset, helping each other. It was remarkable to watch, remarkable to watch. These are hard to see because they're middle of the night, but let's see what you can see. This is some of the areas of the camps when tents started showing up. You can see just bonfires. The field, I want to show you the field to the right there, by the way. The first night I got there, that field had people sleeping in it. It was just a field, a muddy field. Yeah.
Could they have walked the 5 miles, or like what?
Yeah. So the first 2 days we were there before this is like day 18 or 19, and they had tents and stuff there. That's all they were doing. You see women with strollers and people just walking to try to get to town because that's where the next train connection was. But that's when the trafficking problem became horrific. When I talk about the trafficking problem, I'm talking about the sex slave traffic. Lucifer has his way of getting his paws on stuff like that, and we have not hundreds, there are thousands of women that are missing. Just snatched up on the border in those early days. And so one of the things we got approved by the government, the part of that was, we started getting these wristbands, and we had a little bit on that, but the wristbands were the way that we could get in, and we were certified with them. They could trust us as a driver, but it still was trouble because these words were getting back. You can imagine, dads, husbands, you just sent your wife 4 or 5 day journey in the middle of nowhere, not knowing if you'd be alive or not, and they get to a border, they get across the border, and then you're hearing that all these women are being taken, and your children are hungry, they haven't had diaper changes in days, right? You can imagine the complexity of this thing. And oh, by the way, honey, I've got this guy with a van, he wants to give us a ride. You manage the courage it took for these folks to go, I'll get in your van with you. It was tricky. And so the more we could do to get more ways of help them feel comfortable, we'd let them use our phones to see Facebook with our family. They could talk to our children if they wanted to. We'd let them hotspot our phones so they could put Google Maps on so their husband could track where we were going, whatever we could do. Because you can imagine how desperate you have to be to know that 1 in 5 of these cars is going to be somebody that's going to take me away.
So at the same time, I was grateful when someone would turn me down, just because I thought if they're going to turn me down, they're going to turn down someone who has ulterior motives. And they would apologize, and I'd say, hey, don't apologize. So I said, if my wife was in a similar situation and she was 4 days walking, taking trains, riding a bus, come to a land that she doesn't know, and she hears of trafficking going on, and a man came up to her and said, jump in my van, I'll take you to where you need to go. I said, I personally would hope she would say no. So don't apologize. So I was almost relieved sometimes when people would tell me no, because I knew that they would eventually get to where they needed to be.
And in the early days, I would say early days, 2-3 weeks before he's there, that we didn't get told no. It was desperate. It was that or you sat out and froze to death. So that's when they really caused a lot of trouble.
One thing the government did do the last few days that I was there, they put a great big sign up at Border Patrol and then handed out pamphlets. And then as they entered into this camp, there was another large sign on the fence that said, "Do not trust private drivers. You can only be safe if taking Polish buses." And so that caused a lot of people to start questioning where and how they were getting to where they needed to go. So it took more effort, took more trust to get them to realize that we're just there to help, because they're seeing pamphlets and signs everywhere saying, "Do not get in a personal van." That was just the last couple days that I was there.
Yeah. Here's just a walk up on one of the slower nights. Just kind of get a walk around
So this is part of the crazy that is the border crossing. And these are the fields they were in. They stood down in tents. And people in lines, massive lines. It's like this bus, just full. But there are no buses here. And look at the children. This is the mayhem in the city. The support people that are now kind of set up here. But it's getting nighttime. So, see here, this is, it's dark, it's closed. The people have donated. And there's some media here. And they got some famous guy here who's playing the piano for people.
Remember on the Titanic, when they got over to play music? Same thing. Sounds like music.
Anyways, it's hard to see. I'm walking quickly and trying to get some folks. But hopefully you can kind of see what's going on. And by the way, there's some more tents that goes right here. And the music is back playing. But this is where we have to come find people. And we have people that are waiting for us, and then we have to find them in this. And it is nothing short of a miracle every time we find them. So, bye for now. I'm going to go see if I can find my other party here tonight.
We would get a desperate phone call for us to go find, and sorry about those audio levels, y'all. It's okay if you want to do this or do this. We're making it up as we go. Was that we'd get a call saying, "My mom's at the border, can you go find her? She's got a black coat on and there's 2 children and they have a stroller." Good luck. In the first week, we had 77 people that we had been asked to go find their family on the border, with nothing more, for the most part, than her name's Natasha and she's got 2 kids. I will tell you, we found all of them. And it's one of the spiritual experiences of being there, to just be led. It was the most bizarre thing you could have ever put your head around. There was one in particular where we couldn't find a lady, and we finally just said, "You know what, we just need to ask Heavenly Father for some help on this one. We can't find him." And I'm not going to kid you when I tell you that the gentleman went, "Amen." We lifted our heads up and said, "Okay, let's start looking," as he gets a tap on the shoulder, and this lady says, "Is your name Rick?" And that was our family. And it got to the time where we were like, "You can't make this up anymore." It was like that every day. Every day. We would just find these people as they went along the way. Again, this was kind of the tent city that kind of came up, and you can see there's a lot of trash going on, and that's about all you had for refuge at the border. The only thing you're not seeing there is that pathway is crowded with people, 5, 8 people across for about a mile, typically, when they get off the train. At this point, we're about day 24, and you can see now there's lots of tents along that walkway that normally is chock full of people, and there's just people giving out free food, free clothes, anything. Just tons of, these are just people. Yeah, people in the community. As you can see, there's no government entity there. And they would wait until about midnight when the big train would show up. We'll just have you ride that, Doug, if you can, so it doesn't get too loud, too quiet. Is that okay? So about an hour from this point, that venue becomes flooded with 50,000 people. And then they stand in line all night. All night, yeah. We have no idea. No idea. We know there are some issues with Poland wanting to be in charge. We got it. We can handle it. Everything's just fine. We know that some of that was there. Some of those large groups, it takes a while to get them activated. They're huge. And what we were doing there just took a lot of just independent people just trying to figure it out. They're there now. And yeah, the Red Cross is in Ukraine now. And so that's great to see. Some of the large church organizations, the LDS Church, when we got there, they had one couple that were in Krakow, Poland, that we hooked up with. And we started helping them get people that were calling their hotline off the border. And it took a couple of weeks before the machines started showing up. We started seeing the big guns showing up. And one of the things, I remember the night I went to the camp and I ran into their main humanitarian gentleman by accident. It's funny how that works. We had a lot of those by accident. And he's like, "Are you the guys that are running around picking people up?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Show me around. We've been hearing about it. Don't tell us what you're doing. Show us everything. Take me everywhere." And before the night was over, he ran into an official and said, "Look, we're from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We have lots of resources. How can we help you tonight?" And the lady says, "We need children's underwear and women's underwear. These people have been in their clothes for 7 to 10 days. And we have clothes, but we don't have anything, undergarments." And he said, "You'll have it by 4 a.m. And they had 30,000 pair. Like that. It was amazing to watch. Sure, that one is. Just parking lots. People. These were people that walked off the border and they got into the refugee camp area, and they were just walking in parking lots, just trying to survive, trying to find people to give them a ride. Keep in mind, these people have been doing this now for, again, anywhere from 4 to 10 days to get to this point. Yeah. Yes, in the early stages, a lot of people that came across knew where they were going, and you couldn't get across the border unless you give them an address. And so they had a good idea where they were going. Those people that came out early. Then we started seeing people that came out who didn't have anywhere to go. And now we're seeing a lot more desperation. The people that don't have anywhere to go, but they've also been a month without food and water, running sewage. So the desperation is much harder now at the border than it was in the earlier days. They were a little more prepared, a little healthier. And we're not seeing that now. They're a lot more ragged when they show up to the border now. And they're just letting them in, which is hard because they don't have any way to track them either. Here's when they finally made a refugee camp for us in Krakow. This is a kind of a run-out shopping complex. What we can't show you is the rooms after rooms after rooms of people piled on top of each other. They didn't want us filming down that way. So this was just kind of the entrance where we pick people up. And on the walls, you see all these little signs and maps. These are people that just put signs up saying, "I can take you here, I can take you here, I've got 2 seats, I can take you here." And that's how unorganized it was when we got there. But it was a room that people could go into and get out of the weather. I took this picture of this little family. It's hard to, you can see now when we talk about the piles. They were just piled on top of each other. Everybody just piled. In this particular case, this little family, this little girl right here is such a little doll. None of them are crying. None of them are complaining. The only thing they owned was that bag right there. And we gave this little girl this little doggy. And it took her about 15 seconds to fall asleep. Yeah. She grabbed that thing, went like this. You know, out. So it's just one of those tender moments of what was going on there at the border. This lady you can see here, this was a lot of the kind of things we were working with, because they didn't really work on the train, they didn't really work on the bus. You know, she couldn't walk, and yet all these people, in this case you have some helpers here, but this band of people behind her, which you can't see, are just refugees who said we're going to help her, and they carried her the last 2 days to get her to that border. The lines, the lines. And you see they're all having winter gear because it's cold. The lines, here they're not allowed to go past this border. And there they stood. You will see that some people have like suitcases. We'll talk a little bit about that. You knew when things were bad because people would show up without suitcases. Most people showed up with baggies. So you had a mom with a baby in this arm, a baby in this arm, and some baggies. And she'd just be walking. And one of the things we've been doing lately is buying up hundreds of suitcases. Anywhere we could find them in Poland, we were buying suitcases and giving them to people as they got across the border. Because the reason they didn't have suitcases is they voluntarily left theirs behind so someone could have more room on the train. So everything they had in their life was in a suitcase, and then they couldn't get enough people on the train, so people just threw their bags off the train and showed up with nothing but a baggie. Nothing. There's a perfect example. I saw so much of this I can't even tell you. Just bundle them all up and run. Nobody went, and this is what you saw. Just bags. Just people with baggies. That was it. That's all they owned. And the lines. This was to try to get into a refugee center. Paul, these are some of your pictures. I'll let you have that clicker.
On those bags, it was interesting because we talked to people, and as they leave their house, they would grab what was most important to them. Think about if you had to leave your house and you only had minutes to do it, and what you would throw in. But as Will mentioned, by the time they had the idea to take suitcases, but then when they got to the train or to the bus, it was shoulder to shoulder people, and they had to leave the things that were most valuable to them, leave them behind at the train stations and the bus stations. And
there's often pictures.
This is the perfect example of what we saw, literally like Walmart equivalent bags. People would have 2 or 4 of them in both hands walking across the border. And that's why we got into the suitcase business, and we've made a lot of shops in Krakow and the surrounding area very, very wealthy as we spend thousands and thousands of dollars on suitcases. This was my experience. This is over on the Ukraine side. I guess this is kind of hard to see, but the train station is about, it's a couple miles from the border, and people would get off the train, and there was just this steady stream of people who would walk from the train station to the border crossing. And I learned that this was a great opportunity to gain people's trust. There are elderly carrying bags. There's women carrying the children, like what you saw in Will's pictures. And by the time you get to them and ask them for help, there's no pride. They're willing to let you help them. And so you walk this pathway with them, and you stand in line with them, and slowly you gain their trust. You share pictures of your family. You talk about family, you talk about their family, you talk about where they came from, and you get their trust. So when they finally do get past border control, they trust you enough that they're willing to get in your vehicle so you can continue to help them. This is the line at Medica. The border control house is right here. There was only 2 agents, sometimes 3, that was working there. And so this line would be on average 5 to 6 hours long.
It's one of 15 lines they had to get into before they get across. I mean, it was line after line after line.
On the first Saturday that I was here, I hadn't found this area yet. I had an interesting progression. When I first got there was a need at the train station in Krakow helping people, so I spent a day there. And then we went down to the border and helped at the refugee processing center, and would take people from there to Krakow, and then the next morning get them on a train or on an airplane or on the bus to their final destination. And then that was pretty well organized, so then I moved to the border itself and worked the Polish side of the border and helping people as they came through passport control. And then learned that there was a greater need on the Ukraine side of the border. And so I jumped on that side. A lot of people initially weren't willing to go over there, but it needed to be done, and I felt like it was safe, and so I jumped over, and this is what I saw, is lines like this. And I learned that on the Saturday, I arrived on a Thursday, and that Saturday, as Will mentioned, it was cold. We were wearing beanies and winter coats and hands in pockets at all times. And on Saturday night, two children died in this line from hypothermia. So I'm like, this is where I need to spend my time. We gotta help people in this line. This line on this night was 12 hours long. We talked to people who were at the very front of the line and asked them how long they had been in line, and it was 12 hours. That was the longest line that I saw. I know the line was a lot longer before I arrived. But these people are waiting to pass through Ukraine. I thought it was, I still don't know to this day. You would think the long lines would be getting into Poland. There's so many questions that could be asked. Do you have a final destination? How long are you gonna be here? Where are you going? There was never really a real long line to get into Poland. The line was right here to exit Ukraine. And another one of the saddest things that you would see is these fathers who would take their children and their spouse to this line. And then as they got close to where their spouse and children would go through to meet with the border control agent, they would separate. And these poor kids have no idea why dad's walking one way and they're walking with mom another way, and they just can't comprehend it. And they're hugging their dad's legs, and dad's hugging them and pushing them towards mom, and he just has to turn his back and walk away, or these kids won't leave him. And it's one of the most heartbreaking things you'll ever experience, is the separation. If you're older than 18 and younger than 65, most likely you're staying in Poland in Ukraine, unless you have 3 or more children. There were certain exemptions. One was if you had 3 or more children. There was other medical issues, but even the medical issues were very thoroughly vetted. And most of those men still had to stay inside Ukraine.
I don't know about you, Paul. I didn't meet any men ever that wanted to leave. None of them. Some that could. We saw they brought kids that had enough credentials to be able to walk across the border with their wives and children and not go back, and not one.
And I have
Ever
one.
did. Not one.
He had 4 children. His sister-in-law had 2 children. His mother-in-law was there. There was another sister-in-law that was 18 years old. And so he was kind of the male representative of this family of 12 that walked over, but a lot of times you saw that, and I'll show some other pictures. So this is the actual border. There's no man's land. It's about 150 yards long where you exit Ukraine, and before you enter into Poland, or where the Polish Border Patrol house is, there's this 150-yard path. And halfway through that path, if you look out to your side, is the actual border, where it's plowed up, and they have this going down, and there's like a watch station that's about 100 yards or so down here. And then this is people who have just left the Polish border control agents, which is in a building right about here, and there's about another 150-yard walk that they have. They're officially in Poland now, but this is all border control, and it's tight security, and so most people aren't allowed up through here until they pass this gate area. So these members here have all passed through Polish border control. More pictures of what Will showed you. Just this tent city that took place, and again, no government agencies there at all, and no large agencies. It was all just individuals. People who saw a need and wanted to help. And it was interesting because at first they would wait for people to take stuff. They had things set up on tables, and by the time I left, it was almost a competition between tents on who could give away the most stuff. Bottled water, hot soup, hot tea, coffee, pizza, French fries, and there are actually some really good food here. I had a lamb stew that was quite nice that I grabbed as I was going up to the border once.
And that's only because you hadn't eaten in 4 days.
Yeah.
It's a true story. We didn't eat for days.
And so, you know, the suitcases that Will talked about, we noticed all these mothers carrying children with the Walmart bags, just those plastic bags. And it was a luxury if you had something like that blue bag that you saw that was just a little bit higher quality, you could carry a little bit more. And we thought, we need to buy suitcases. And so we started buying suitcases, and we bought every suitcase we could find, and every day we'd bring them up to the border. And we would pass them out at the border. We'd find those who needed them the most, find the moms or people who just had a lot of individual bags, and would start giving them a suitcase. This is your picture, right?
Picture, yeah. So just a little background how it kind of all started. This is the first child I met when I was there. This is my first run. We got to the border, we just got out on the street and started. At this point, people were just walking everywhere, mothers. And this is my first little friend that I met. You saw them a little bit in the other video, but you could see just, you know, she's dirty. They're doing living on the ground. But the sweetest little guys.
There they are. There he is. What's on? What's your name? Say. Brent. Okay. Is this Natasha? Who's this? Adriana. Adriana.
She'd walked about 6 miles to get to this point, and she just kept walking. She didn't know where she was going. She was, I just keep walking until I find something. Just kept walking. And that was that little crew you saw early on.
The thing that I think is interesting about this is if you didn't know who Will is, or you'd have no idea that he's not a refugee in that picture. We wore yellow vests, and that was the only thing that separated us from the refugees. Other than that, if you took your vest off, people would think you're a refugee. They looked exactly like this room in here.
Yeah.
So you can see my yellow vest there. You know, I had my name on the front, everyone did, and your name on the back, what languages you speak. So people would come up to you because they thought you were local, and they'd start jabbering in you like English, or use the Google Translate. Got really good at Google Translate. It wasn't perfect, but it was.
We said some pretty offensive things to Google Translate.
Yeah, it's.
And you'd only know if you'd give it to them, and you go, huh?
Yeah.
I'm like, what did I say?
Exactly. You had to look at their expression to see if the translation was good or not. And if they got a real confused or like almost scared look on your face, you're like, no.
I'll retype it.
And you take it and retype it and try and find another way, a simpler way to say what you're trying to say. Question?
Yeah, the unknown destination folks, that's a great question. We don't know. There were different refugee camps that were being set up across Europe, and they'd go there. Many of them would just go into town and rent a hotel room. We finally got to where enough hotel rooms were open. We were booking 14 hotels a night just because we knew before the night was out we'd fill them. You just find people on the street and you'd be like, you have no place to stay tonight, and they're freezing, shivering. You're like, please come to my hotel. I got a hotel for you. And we just sleep in our van. So they're just whatever place they could find, parks, whatever.
In the refugee processing center that Will showed in the one video, the old warehouse. Yeah, this is it here. This is the outside here. And then this is the largest room inside. I took this picture really quick. You're not supposed to take pictures, but they had just cleaned everyone out. And so since it was mostly empty, I quickly took this picture. There's over 1,000 cots in this area. And they had 8 or 9 different rooms, and they organized refugees based on their final destination. So this room was Poland and Germany, and that's why it was the largest. A lot of people would go to Germany. There were 2 lice breakouts while I was there.
They had disease problems that started.
Where they kicked everybody out, sent them out to the parking lot. They'd throw all the bedding away, they'd fumigate it, and then invite everyone back in. And then, you know, if you're familiar with lice, 3 or 4 days later, the lice was back. But in that refugee center, to answer your question, in one of the corners there was 10 or 12 countries all throughout Europe that were represented. And they would tell the refugees what they were offering. For example, Finland was offering free transportation to Finland and 90 days of free housing to allow refugees to not have to worry about paying for housing, finding a job, finding employment, what to do with their children. And that was what Finland was offering. Other countries were offering other things to people, housing with people who were just volunteering their house. And so if someone didn't know where they were going, that was one of the, after I got to know them, one of the first questions I would ask is, do you know where your final destination is? And a lot of people said yes, but for the few who said no, I actually recommended they stay at the processing center and work with these countries and talk to all of them and see which country would work out best for them, so they could then know where they wanted to take their family. You know, just like they had the piano at the border, these two gentlemen were right there at the entrance. People would walk in and they had another line to get processed, and they were there greeting them and singing and just trying to make it as good as possible. One of the things that I really enjoyed was networking with people. The more you networked, the easier it was to get things done. And so if you just go back one, so these ladies, they're nurses. That's a doctor up front, Dr. Teresa. She was from Buffalo. She's been in Mexico forever, and she came here just on her own to help out. She ended up being bored here, a lot of cough syrup, ibuprofen, Band-Aids, but she's like, that's not why I came to Ukraine. And so she actually crossed the border, and we helped her set up a medic about a mile inside the border. And so that's where she is now. And then this is Dee Dee. She's from Pittsburgh, and she recognized this lady. I didn't recognize her because I don't watch too much cable TV, but I guess that's a really popular Fox News reporter. This is her cameraman, Peter, and so she wanted a picture with her, and so we jumped in. But networking was great because I would text Dee Dee in the morning this place is called Tesco. It's just an old, like, Home Depot type, and so the actual city, you can see the name there, it's Przemyśl. I know I'm saying it wrong, it's really hard to say, and Tesco is really easy to say, so we just referred to it as Tesco. But I'd call or text her and say, how busy is Tesco? And it would either be really busy, and that's where we would go first, or not so busy, then we would go straight to the border or to a different border crossing. So it was really helpful. Donnie and Precious from Israel, their tent was the first tent as people crossed the border and went through that gate. It had a women and children's area, a warm tent that they could go to.
Of interesting note, by the way, a lot of people went to Israel.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that were going to Israel. There was just like this gathering of all the Jewish people out of Ukraine were going back to Israel. Yeah.
So these people fleeing, are they in their minds, do you know, were they thinking, oh, I'm never going to go back to my homeland, so they were looking for permanent home?
Yes. Many of them don't believe they're ever going back. And if you look at there's many of those cities, there's nothing to go back to anymore. They all want to, but they recognize they've got to settle in and find a job and start a new life somewhere, and hope that their sons and their husbands get to join them someday and aren't killed. Yeah.
Yeah. She's got a Hebrew name that she goes by. I can't even come close to pronouncing it. And I told her it wasn't fair that she could call me Paul, and I had something that was impossible to say. That was her name. So she told me, well, in English, my name means precious. I said, all right, then I'm gonna call you Precious. But that almost got me in trouble because I was on the phone with her and had other people in my car, and I was like, okay, Precious, this is great, appreciate the information. Called her Precious several times through the 5 or 10 minute conversation. And I hung up, and people were like, so was that your wife? And I'm like, oh, no, but let me explain.
Yeah, good luck with that one,
yeah, so, but just lifelong friends now. Donnie is back at the border now. He went home back to Israel for a week, and he just returned 2 days ago to the border. But just great networking, because they were right there at the entrance from when people would exit the Polish border control, and so they had great information all of the time on the situation at the border. This is Peter. He's one that I met. He has twin 11-year-old daughters that he separated with, along with his wife. A businessman. He started a garage door company a year ago. I went to China, bought garage door openers, thought, you know, people have this in America. It's fairly new in Ukraine. I'm going to start this business. Sold his initial order, got excited, spent everything he had on electric gates and garage door openers, and then the war started. And so he doesn't know what he's going to do, but he became a great friend. In fact, when I decided to go to Lviv, I called him, only meeting him one day, but he said, hey, if you ever need anything on the Ukraine side, let me know. I live 100 kilometers from the border, so I called him up and said, I need to go to Lviv, are you in? And he said, sure, so we arranged to meet. We were gonna leave Sunday night, but we would have arrived in Lviv at 10:30 at night, and there's a curfew at 10 o'clock. And after 10 o'clock, the police have free reign to shoot whatever they see as a threat. And so he was a little uncomfortable. And when he explained that to me, I didn't push the issue either. So we left Monday morning to go into Lviv. And, you know, you just do a lot of things on faith. I've told a few people this story, and even the people I was with thought I was stupid. But Peter's an amazing man, and you feel good when you're talking to him. And I think he's actually going to help us quite a bit as we organize runs of supplies from the border to Lviv. We have these rental vans that will show up at all the rental companies, have GPS tractors, and they make it very clear to you when you rent your van that it is not to go into Ukraine. You can take it anywhere else in Europe, and you know, Will went to Croatia, you mentioned, I went to Germany.
They were concerned you'd never come back out with that van.
Yeah.
That was the problem. And that's a real concern. You could get in, but you couldn't get gas to get out. So.
Another group, a couple Idahoans, he's from Kimberly. Him and Will actually know they didn't know they knew each other, but they had some connections.
We've known each other for actually a lot of years and showed up at the same place at the same time. So it was like,
Didn't know
if we were both going there.
And also became a great network. The other three are from Utah. Will had left when we actually crossed. The day that he left was the day that I arrived. And so I stayed with these guys, and this was at the end of a 40-hour day. I got there, they were leaving, I jumped in with them so they could kind of show me how they do things. We ended up making 3 trips from Krakow to Przemyśl. It's about 2.5 hours one way each time. And so we were picking up people, they would tell us of other people that were there. So we'd go back and grab them, and it was an amazing 40 hours, and never tired because the adrenaline's going so much that you just know if you're sleeping, there's people that need your help, and I don't know, you almost feel guilty to go to sleep because you know that there's someone that's literally possibly dying if you don't get yourself back to the border and help them get to safety.
The most sleep I had there was 3.5 hours any given night.
My average return time to the hotel was 3 or 4 in the morning. Latest was 5 in the morning, and the earliest was 2 in the morning. And then I'd be up I'd be leaving the hotel by 7 to go and start back. When we were traveling once from Tesco back to the border, it's about maybe 5-6 miles, takes you 15-20 minutes to get there. This gentleman, Sasha, he was hitchhiking, and Dave said, let's pull over and pick him up. And so I didn't notice him, so we pulled over, and then Dave's like, I don't know if this is a good idea. So, but we ended up picking him up, and then we found out that he was part of the Russian resistance. He's from this town here. It looks like Chernihiv, but I know I'm pronouncing it right, or wrong, Bill, right? So, but that's where he's from, and they take great pride in this city. It's up north of Kiev, and it's the only city in the north that hasn't fallen to Russian soldiers. It's been bombed, there's not much left of it, but every time that Russian soldiers try to enter it, they get pushed back, and they take great pride in that. And this warehouse, it's a school gymnasium, but it's their staging area. And they get equipment, helmets, flak jackets, radios, generators. This sign talks about them being the Russian resistance. One of the organizations from that Dave here represented bought a $1,000 generator and gave to them because they needed it. And so they sent that up, and they sent us pictures of it being used in Chernihiv out by the soldiers there. They really needed two-way radios. The technology in Ukraine is 3M, the cellular technology, and I don't understand cellular technology, but I know that the Ukraine government has been able to shut it down specific for Russian phones, and then they've been able to block their two-way radios or whatever radios they're using, and that's why one of the reasons why the Ukraine army is being so successful is you may have heard in the news that there's been 7 generals that they've been able to kill. And what happens is the generals are halfway or 2/3 back in their convoy, and the convoy stops, and the general has no idea why, because there's no communication. So he gets frustrated, and he gets out of his armored personnel carrier and starts walking to the front of the convoy to figure out what's going on so he can direct traffic, and that's when they get knocked off. And that's worked every time. And a lot of people are saying, well, including me, until I met Peter, I say the Russian army's so dumb, they have these miles-long convoys down the middle of the street. How easy is that to knock off? Well, they have no other choice because they have a real specific type of soil. It's very organic, and as soon as these tanks go off into the farm fields, they sink. The tracks just turn, and so they can't go into the fields, and so they're stuck on the roads, which is a little bit of a blessing because they say Putin wanted to invade Ukraine during the Olympics, and Xi from China asked him to wait until the Olympics were over, and he agreed to do that. Well, the ground was still frozen during the Olympics, so it could have been a much different war than it is today. But now these tanks are stuck in columns on roads because if they get off roads, they sink in the soil. So we arranged, there's always people coming over and they'd say, what can we bring? And so I said, hey, they need radios, so here's some radios that we brought. And just these radios alone brought everybody out from the corners. There were people showing up and they were literally jumping up and down and celebrating that they had these radios because they needed them so bad. This is entering Lviv. It's a city of 2 million people, and when you come to the outside, I didn't know this until after I took these pictures, but you aren't supposed to take any pictures of their barricades. And it's like an S. It's a double S that you weave in and out to enter the city. And there's concrete barriers behind these sandbags. They have these tank stoppers, several of them that are off to the side now, but they can easily be pulled out if necessary. There's machine gun bunkers that are ready to go at a second's notice in here. And they've arrested over 100 Russian spies within Lviv. And that's why you don't take pictures, because they found that they find people at night, they go and interrogate them, they look at their phones and they'll see that their phones are full of pictures of government buildings. And they'll look at their text messages and they're all going to Russian numbers, telephone numbers. And so you learn real quick what to take pictures of and what not to. But I will say this, once you get in Lviv, it's a beautiful city and life is moving forward. Schools are open, cafes are open, people are going to work. An air raid siren went off while I was there. People hunker down for a period of time. And then when the message comes out that it's safe, they get back to life and move forward. So once you pass these barricades that are all on the outside of the city, in Lviv, life is, I would say, normal in a war type sense, because anything could happen. There's a website called liveuamap.com, and it has up to the second information on what's taking place throughout all of Ukraine, whether there's jets in the air, missiles being fired, a troop movement, if who's the president? Zelensky. I knew it wasn't Lewinsky, that didn't sound right. Zelensky, if he makes a statement, that will pop up, but it's just a it's a dynamic map that is constantly, and I'm glued to it ever since I've been home, just wanting to know what's taking place there. One thing that I did notice once you enter Lviv is the amount of Ukraine pride that exists throughout this city, and I'm told throughout all of Ukraine. Flags flying everywhere. Flags in Poland flying the Ukraine flag. There was a smokestack in Krakow, and it would, at night, it would be red and white, and then for like 5 seconds, and then it would go to yellow and blue, and it would transition just back and forth. And we would drive people through, and they would see that, and it'd make them feel so good, seeing that, feeling like they were welcome. But there was these signs that were pro-Ukraine signs. This is probably the most popular sign that you see. It's got some vulgar language in it, but if you recall at the beginning of the war, there was Snake Island. It had the 12 or 13 Ukrainian servicemen on it, and there was a Russian battleship offshore. I told them to surrender, and they said, "Russia ship, blank you." And that has become the slogan throughout all of Ukraine. You see this sign everywhere. It's on businesses, like instead of having advertising on the front of your business, you see a sign like this. There's talking about Ukraine, strength, fight for Ukraine, just signs all over the place. Will and I were talking about the families that we've helped, and it was hard to know which ones to share with all of you because they're all amazing stories, and there's miracles that happened in each one of them. But this is a family that I ran into, and that it was a 6-hour line at the time to exit Ukraine. They had this 4-year-old boy, and this small petite mom was holding him. Asked her if I could hold him, and she said yes, and I ended up holding him for an hour, and literally couldn't feel my arms when we were gotten to the car, but I couldn't show that because I didn't want her to know how bad I was hurting, because one, I knew that she had to be hurting more than me. But we got them to safety and got them on to Spain. And then 2 days ago, she reached out to me and asked if I could help her best friend and her daughter. And so I was in Boise at the time. It was Sunday morning at 3 in the morning, and then I was wide awake, messaging our group back in Krakow and making arrangements, sending her pictures of who was going to pick her up, who was Lance. Will's mentioned Lance a little bit. This is Lance. And then they were able to meet, and then he took her back to Krakow, and she has family in Netherlands, and that's where she's ending up. Another great family. It took me 3 days to convince this family to get in my van. Started with playing soccer with this young man. He was playing by himself in the refugee processing center. Started playing with them, asked the family if I could help them, and they said no. Went to day 2, played with them again for an hour, and asked them where they were going. They were going to Germany, said, "Hey, I can get you to Krakow," and on the train station straight to Germany. And they said, "No, we're okay." And then on day 3, we played again. He's actually doesn't play soccer, but his sister here, I later learned, is an incredible soccer player, but she wouldn't play because she said I wasn't good enough. And I'm not a soccer player. But that was, I guess she's really good, but she didn't want to join us because I didn't have the skills that met her expectations. But I asked them, I said, "You've been here for 3 days," and they actually said, "We've been here for 4. They said, "They keep telling us a bus is coming." I said, "I can get you to Krakow and get you on the train." And so they finally believed or trusted us enough, and we got them to Krakow, and we ended up driving them all the way to Germany because there wasn't great connections for them. Another family that we helped, a 16-year-old girl, she spoke some English, her mom and little sister, and then some friends of the family. Great help. When I went to Lviv, I ran into this family, a little miracle here. She had tickets the very next day to fly from Krakow down to the country of Georgia. But she was stuck in the LDS church house in Lviv and had no way to get from Lviv to Krakow. I drove into Lviv just to take some supplies to the church and just to analyze the needs that they had there. And I told them, I said, "Hey, I have a room for 3 in the car. The back seat's empty. if anyone needs to ride. And they said, actually, there's a lady that's distraught because she has tickets in the morning to fly from Krakow to Georgia, and she doesn't know how she's going to get there. And she has her 16-year-old son here and a 6-year-old Down syndrome boy. And this boy is just, he's a light. Such a great young man. 24-year-old lady from Sumy, from the very north, one of the first areas that was taken over by Russia. The only child in her family, her grandparents were too old to travel. Her parents stayed behind to take care of her grandparents, but they insisted that she leave because they wanted the family legacy to live on. So they basically forced her to leave. It took her 4 days to get to the border. Combination of trains, buses, and a lot of walking. On the train, they would travel only at night. They weren't allowed to have their cell phones on. There could be no light on at all on the train. They didn't want any lights. The train would stop for hours at a time with no communication. They just didn't know why. Shoulder to shoulder, you couldn't sleep. She stood there for hours all through the night, but finally got to the border, and she's now in Croatia also. And then this family of 12, and where I mentioned this is the man that came across the border. 16-year-old son. Mom is right here. She has 6 kids. One's in Washington, D.C., and then a couple stayed behind. Her husband's behind. One daughter has 4 children. The other daughter has 2 children. This is an interesting story. This is another little miracle where we met them. I love playing with little kids. Met them at the border crossing. There were so many of them, it took them a long time. I was actually helping an elderly lady, and I was there for an hour waiting for her to pass through border control, and she ended up not being able to get through. But while I was waiting for her, I just started playing with these little kids because they had gotten through, but they weren't exiting the building because they're waiting for the rest of the group. And so I got to know them, got to know their parents. We took them to Krakow. We put them up at this hotel. It's a Sheraton. They got out of the van, and the little boy turns to his father and he said, "Dad, this is just like the movies." They had never stayed in a hotel in their life. They walked in, they went into their rooms, kids are jumping on the bed. It was a short break from everything that they'd been through, all the bombing and things that they were running from. We later ended up taking them all the way to Western Germany, and because for them to get, they had a house that they were staying at, and but it would have taken 2 trains and 2 buses to get there, and there was a 30-minute connection between one of the trains and buses, and we just felt like this family wasn't going to be able to make all those connections and stay together, so we made the decision to drive them 9 hours one way to Western Germany. And when we pulled up to this house, they used Google Translate, and they wrote this to us. They said, they had just told their dad that they made it safely to their final destination. It says, "Dad cried. He said, 'I am very grateful to God for keeping my family and gave my help when it is very necessary. If God preserves the life of our dad, I'm sure he will necessarily look for opportunities to tell you the words of gratitude. You are very kind.'" They're just a very grateful people. And we later learned that when they had to separate from their dad and father of the lady with 2 kids and then a brother there, that the father prayed that his family would stay together, that they wouldn't be separated. We had no idea until we pulled up to the house in Germany, and they shared that with us. And so it's just funny how things work, how you make decisions, and you have no idea why you make the decisions you do until later. But this was a family whose father was back in Ukraine, who prayed that his family wouldn't be separated, and we were able to keep them together as one unit.
Well, it's going to take a time. We're going to cut through some of these kind of quickly.
There's a question.
Oh, question? Yes.
I got a question. So how is the Ukraine military doing?
They're awesome.
They're incredible.
Successful.
Yeah.
You know.
I pity the Russian military. If they didn't have cruise missiles and jets, they'd have been slaughtered by now.
If there was a no-fly zone established, the war would all be over.
Yeah. They're mighty. I'm not kidding you. They are valiant people, and they are lighting them up. Yeah.
Were these people that getting on trains to come across? Do they have to pay for that train, or were they just running the trains to get people out?
Yeah. The question for the trains and the public transportation at the very beginning was free. Anybody could get on. Poland was awesome. They just opened up every train they could, every bus they could, and said it's all free. Just jump on. We were in negotiations yesterday morning. I was speaking with some people from Uber, and Uber had contacted us asking if we could communicate with them and work. They have got credentialed drivers and they've got funds for free rides, but they don't have any street presence, and so they've asked us to start becoming their street presence. So in the next few days, we might have a whole army of Uber involved as well, but yes, thank you. I'll play a little video. This is the first girl. We gave her some food. Oh, volume is. We gave away a lot of that.
Yeah, this pouch applesauce, although it wasn't applesauce, it was something that wasn't great for my palate. But like an applesauce, but the kids ate it up. We ended up buying everything we could find in these pouches to pass out to kids.
Look how they're all bundled. This girl is so cute. Look at her little. Is she breaking your heart or what?
Thank you.
Her mom's asking her to tell me thank you. That was her fourth one.
What's her name?
That was her fourth one.
What's her
My
name?
name is Alina.
Hi, Elaine.
Hi.
Hello. She's so cute. Say hi, bye.
Какой у дяди телефон цветом, скажи?
Yeah, привет. I want to make this note. This was the back of our van, and this is all that they had. This was their family, and this is all they brought. That's it. That's all they had for us. And then we finally got her in the car, got her in a car seat, look at her little face.
Алина, пока, Маши, пока. Ну, машину, помаши дядю.
Bye. Oh, she just fell in love. She's got a little bag of cookies there the way she went. Now, I had to show you this one only because we had dropped them off in town, and 3 days later, we were dropping some people off at a whole other part of town, and guess who's at that different hotel? They were supposed to be going to Denmark, and the people pulled on them. And they've been so stranded now in Krakow. They got nowhere to go. And so they ended up at a different hotel, but we were dropping some people off. And that little girl right there, that's my new little girlfriend. That's Alina. And she goes up to my son, and she's giving him candy and telling him thank you. And the other driver, over here, thank you, she'd say. See the cutest thing you've ever seen in your life? But they're stranded now. They had nowhere to go.
That happened quite a bit, too. I mean, not the majority of time, but it was not uncommon at all that you would hear people at a destination in Warsaw, that a family or a house was taking in refugees, and they got to that house and then ended up not being there, and they were stranded. It wasn't uncommon to hear of these situations.
So she comes up to me and says, "Can I have a picture?" But it was in Ukrainian, and her mom translated, kind of, "Good picture." So I kneeled down, and she just cuddled up in their little soft little thing there, and I got my own little selfie with her. Cutest thing you've ever seen in your life, isn't she? Yeah, one of our fun little stories. Let me play this one for you. This is some of the press we were getting. This was actually on major Fox News.
Burned following shelling by Russian forces. Millions of women and children are fleeing Ukraine in what the United Nations is calling the fastest growing refugee crisis in
That's
Europe
at the train
since World War
station.
II. And now those desperate Ukrainians are facing threats of kidnapping and human trafficking. Correspondent Aisha Hasni shows us tonight from Poland. Idaho native Rob Sturgill is offering a free ride to a hotel to a young mom who just arrived from Ukraine. He's one of the countless volunteers in Poland showing the best of humanity. But the constant waves of women and children, oftentimes only able to speak Ukrainian, has opened the door to trafficking. A week ago, police detained a 49-year-old man in western Poland for allegedly raping a young refugee girl. He reportedly lured her in by offering her a place to stay. Crisis managers are on the lookout for kidnappers posing as Good Samaritans.
People coming down here and stand outside the center or at the border offering, and when we go and ask them, they can't give us a really good answer for what organization they're coming from or where they're going.
There's also a new system that requires volunteer drivers to register with local authorities and wear a bracelet that proves they are cleared to transport refugees wherever they might need to go. Sturgill has that bracelet. He's also sharing his personal information with the refugees to make them feel at ease.
We actually let them contact family, take a picture of our passports, take a picture of our license plates on the vehicles that we have, and sometimes it does take quite an effort to get them because these people they're scared. They are scared to death.
A few days ago, he got on the phone with a worried Ukrainian man and reassured him that his family was in good hands.
It's tragic, and that is one of the reasons why we've come, is to help try to be the good guys.
And Shannon, crisis managers at these welcome centers are now talking to police to try to get them to ban private vehicles from showing up at these train stations and border crossings, just to avoid any confusion and in order to protect these refugees. They would like to see these refugees only use buses that are paid for by humanitarian aid groups, and also to be able to only travel in groups. There's always safety in numbers. Shannon? Aisha, thank you very much.
Well, one of the-
So let's get to minute.
Oh, line's not working. Hello, Doug. Okay, they took me off. So we were very fortunate. We got to work with the government. We got those bands, and I have mine. They'll be on my in a picture with a family for the rest of my life, because they represented what we were doing, which was trying to save women and children from a disaster. So we were very proud of what was happening and what we were able to accomplish there by getting that process in place. Yeah.
Is there enough food for all these people?
There is now, at least at the border. There's tons and tons of stuff now that showed up at the border. The early days there was nothing, but there is now. The problem is once they got off the border and they got into another train station, then there was nothing. And if they got stranded there, there was nothing, right? Yes?
With that many people on that sanitation is a big issue. Were they able to provide restroom facilities?
Yeah, at the beginning, no. It was everybody just went wherever they could go. The first week I was there were toilets that showed up, those blue ones. The Polish government got some there, but within the first day, they were overrunning everywhere. So you can tell it was just crisis everywhere. It's much better now, but in those early days, it wasn't good at all.
They probably have 30 to 45 outhouses now there at the processing center.
And they're keeping them clean. Yeah, question.
How is their banking system? Like, do these people have money, or is their money gone, or how does that go? Like, if you've left, do you still have access to the money in the banking
No,
accounts, or?
that's a disaster. Nobody wants to take the Ukrainian money, so people are trying to get dollars. But when you got off the border with dollars and headed into Poland, you had to find a place to exchange it. And they were few and far between. And here's a refugee lady with babies wandering around all over town trying to find somebody to exchange dollars for her. And then you had to have Polish money to work in Poland. And then we had Czech money to work in Czechoslovakia. And then we had euros to work in Austria. And then I had to have kuna when I was in Croatia. It was a nightmare when it came to money. And they're not getting paid anything back home. They don't have jobs anymore. So they are destitute, very destitute. I just entered this little family because this is the little family that Bill helped save with me. Bill translated for these folks. We had them on News Talk 107.9 when I was traveling with them. And I won't spend a lot of time on them, but this little family will be forever in my heart. Oh, if I could tell you the tragedy around this little family. And they were just so grateful and kind. And we finally got them into Croatia. I think I was probably the only person in the world that day could have got them into Croatia. It just so happened that I had told a lie to a border guard that I spoke Croatian, and that's how I hooked up with this lady. She had been stuck for days, and I speak a little Croatian. My family's from Croatia, and but I don't speak like this. And he's like, "Oh, you speak Croatian? Here, come help this family." I'm like, "Oh no." Oh, Heavenly Father, I'm so sorry. I just told a big fat lie. Can you please give me the gift of tongues? Because I got to talk to a refugee, and I have no idea what to say to her past how. Hi, how are you? And that's the little family that came from that. They were stranded. But I got to watch this parking lot when they got to meet their family. And that's just part of the family. They came from cars and just ran and met each other. Middle of the night, again. See, everything's at night. And I sat by my van and just wept. It was heaven on earth to watch. It was a different kind of love, right? It was a desperate love. It was this, these people were stranded. They weren't sure how they could get them off the border. And then we ended up getting them into Croatia only because I had a family member that had an address. Who else could have given him an address of somebody that lived in Croatia to get him across the border?
just little things like that, the little miracles that you saw, that how you got connected because you told a lie, and that ended up getting the people that could get. You follow what I'm saying?
Sometimes you had to tell those white lies.
Yeah.
Like, for whatever reason, I still don't fully understand to this day, but you couldn't be both a volunteer and a driver. If you were registered for one, they wouldn't let you register for the other. And so I registered for a volunteer on my left hand, and you saw the green band that was in the picture that Will had just a little bit ago.
You showed the hand you needed to.
And yeah, and then on my right wrist I had the white band that showed that you were a certified driver, and then I wore a long sleeve shirt every day to cover one up.
This was a picture taken by them that I found actually on her Facebook page when she wrote me, and that will be forever on my wall. To understand what happened at this point, after she'd been with her family, and I just got to sit there and watch this reuniting. She and her daughter came over to me, and you can see her head just buried in her daughter, and they just sat and wept. Just sat and wept, just thanking me. And she says to me, "You need to know," when she got done, she goes, "You need to know that we've been praying for 5 days that someone would come that could get us to Croatia, and they told me I had a 1 in a million chance it was not going to happen." And so when you showed up, I'm like, she said, "I just got done praying," and we got up, and someone said, "There's somebody here that speaks Croatian." Oops. You imagine my shock when I went to her and said, "Dobar dan kakosi," which is Croatian. She looked at me like, "What?" She didn't speak Croatian. She spoke Ukrainian. She said she wanted to go to Croatia, and the Polish people didn't understand her and put her off in some room where she was stuck for eternity. But this is where she said to me, she said, "You'll always be my angel, and if it's okay, I want to call you my brother forever." And so we talk every other day. I just heard from her today. She has a job now, and her husband and her son are in a dire situation. They're in a town right now that's just getting obliterated, and it's just a heartbreak to watch.
I think that's another point, though. These people want to work. The man that I took to Germany, his very first day, he washed cars all day long and earned 20 euros. And he was elated. He was so excited that he was able to earn 20 euros in one day's work, more than he had ever made inside of Ukraine. But these people, they're getting handouts. They're not expecting them. They're not looking for them. And a lot of times they're not taking them. They want to work.
Another little lost family here. This is the lady that had got.
We have this little family. A little helper here.
Little guy. He's holding the car seat.
I started walking. We immediately came over and grabbed this little man. And he's holding my car seat. We're helping take this away. He's a little dicer. Hello.
He's trying to grab my hand. "Follow me," he's saying. And you're great. "Follow me. Follow me. Follow me."
Okay. Yes.
So, this was probably the most special night I had there, was with this little family. In the sense that I found out while I was driving her there that one, she was going to a burned out building that had no running water or electricity. You'll see here in a second, because it's the only address she could give the border people to get off the border. She had walked 3 days with those children, and she had no wallet. She had lost it in the bus accident when their bus driver got shot. And so I drove her to this desolate place, and a sister wrote me and said, "Please don't leave them there, or the baby's in the car. Please make sure they get in this building safely." And then, I don't know if some of this will come up or not. We'll see what page we're on. Oh, maybe not. I won't play it for you because it'll crush you. The video that's there shows me where I'm at on the street with this little family, and it is Slumville, and it is dark, and it is 1:40 in the morning, and she has to negotiate with her child down this alleyway that's pitch black. You can't see it. It's so black, and she gets them upstairs to this place. There's no lights being turned on, and I'm like, "What are you staying in?" And she goes, "The only address I could give them." And she asked me if we could help her find food. I'm like, "Find food? We could go buy food." And she's like, "I don't have a wallet. I've lost my wallet." And as she goes up with the one baby, the other baby starts to cry. The little 1-year-old, you saw the little pink thing. She starts to cry. She's sound asleep in the back seat. And I go to the van to try to soothe her. Her eyes are closed, and she lets out this cry. So I don't think I will play it. It will crush you. The poor little girl had her eyes closed, and she was having nightmares. And her mommy came running downstairs and was holding her, and I'm like, "Is she okay? She sounds like she's hurt." And she says, no, she does this every night since our house was shelled. Just nightmares. The baby's a year and a half old. And the poor mom is just devastated. She says, I don't sleep at all because she's having these nightmares at night. And then when I close my eyes, all I see are the bombs going off and my nephew being shot. And I can't get it out of my mind. And I just left her in a 5-story building that's run out with no water, no electricity. It's pitch black and she has no money. And she wouldn't take any.
Yeah, these kids,
couldn't get her to take any.
They'll be changed forever. Similar story. The family where I held the 4-year-old boy, they're safely in Germany. There was a wedding taking place in an area near the home they were staying. And to celebrate the wedding, there were fireworks going off. And the boy, the 12-year-old boy, grabbed his mom and started running to the house. And she's like, "What's wrong?" He's like, "They're bombing us. We need to get into shelter now." And it was just fireworks celebrating a wedding. When I was at a gas station, another 16-year-old boy, it was near an airport, and a jet flew over, and he literally ducked and started looking up. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "What is that? What's going on?" I said, "Oh, there's just an airport near here, and it's just a jet that took off." But he just heard that sound, and like Pavlov's dogs, he was automatically looking for safety.
We'd see little kids, and they'd have the stairs. They'd just be like this, and stairs. And so we started getting toys for them, and we'd play with them, just to try to get them to be kids again. If we could get them to play, you can see them just lighting back up, but many of them just came with these shell-shock stares. It was heartbreaking. So this lady, I finally, I went on my translator and I said, "You need to know this money is from my children," who she had met on this drive a little bit. And I said, "They'll be so offended if you don't accept their gift." I was desperate. I know she would. And she reluctantly said, "I don't want to offend your family because you saved me tonight. So I'll take this money, but other people are going to need it worse than me."
I heard that a lot.
That's the people we were talking with. And then she held it against her heart and then just put her head against my shoulder, and then we sat and wept. She was like, "Thank you, I'm safe." I'm like, "I don't know if you're safe here." And about this time, gunshots go off. And she gives me this kiss on the cheek and pushes me and says, "You must go, it's dangerous." And I'm like, oh, right? And there you left them. And oh, by the way, the next morning I got a text from her, and she said, "I've been worried about you all night. Are you safe?" You can't make it up. This will play. This is...
Do popatrzenia. Cenzura? Cenzura. Ale nie. Uda ci wam słaby Bogu.
I don't know why it's showing it that way, but...
Ja was lubię. Bye. Otherwise, darling. Do popatrzenia. Bye, boys. God bless you.
This was a van. We had 2 vans. Sorry that's not coming through for you. See the little family. They're all hugging each other. 2 moms and a father, and they've gone across the border. Remember, the father could leave. He had enough children, he could leave. And I could tell that he wasn't coming. You could tell he wasn't going to go with the children. But the mother was the shock, because I opened the door for her to get in the van, and she told me to shut the door, please, and drive. She goes, "Please drive away. Just go, please." And she was leaving her children. She was going back to help with the war. And we were to take these 10 children to the border of Germany, where some family could finally get to them. They couldn't get across the border. But you have no idea what it feels like to sit there with a mother who's dying inside while she tells you to please leave. Just go, drive. I can't take it anymore. And that was them saying goodbye to their little family. So this is, we found some places with the church house, the LDS church in Krakow, that opened up for us to have kids in. We had coloring. We played with little dolls. I don't know if this video, remember what this even does right now, but the idea was just to kind of show what was going on. But I think this will take us into, that was our
war room.
That's the war room.
John Norton.
And we'll skip John. He tells the same stories that we are all saying. But this is our little game that we made. And the cutest little voices. And they would just play games. Interesting enough, none of them would play airplane bombs like that, or guns or anything like that. We wouldn't do it. None of them would do it. We couldn't figure out exactly why, but we wouldn't do it. I only took this picture because these are the tents. You see, there's no Red Cross. These are just people from the neighborhood that put up tents to help out. This was our, when I'm telling you, we bought a lot of suitcases. We bought every suitcase we could find in Poland. Samsonite loves us. But that became this brigade that was so fun to watch. We had a story in the train. We first did this. We got to the idea. We ran up to two ladies and 4 kids. You could tell by their baggies they'd been stuck at the train station now 4 days. And we went up with some little ones for the kids, and we said, "Hi, could you guys use some suitcases?" And the one lady stands up and she starts jumping up and down, going, "I told you, I told you, I told you." And she grabs her sister and she starts shaking her, "I told you, I told you, I told you." And we couldn't follow what they were saying, but I had a translator with me. I said, "What's going on here?" And he goes, "You're not going to believe this." And I go, what's going on? And finally, the sister turns around and says, "Yep, it's true." And I said, "What's true?" And the girl said that last night at 3 a.m. she was woken in a dream where she saw people bringing her suitcases so she could put food and clothing in them and get her family off this ground and feel safe getting away from somewhere, right? Because once you left there, you're no man's land. And she'd had this dream that people brought her suitcases. And so she was just so thrilled to have her suitcase. You wouldn't have think that would have been such a prized possession, but that was everything. Because they could get supplies then. They could last a few days longer. The police officers and stuff, we made friends with all these guys. They became our... I did get one of those guys to stick a gun in my head one night. Unfortunately, that was a mistake on my... I took a wrong turn. Don't take a wrong turn and end up in Ukraine. Because these guys show up. It's like, oops, my bad. I am lost. That's all I do is I'm sorry, I'm so lost. But they were super cool about it. And this is just kind of the closeout. These are just, pictures after pictures of just all the people. And keep in mind, there's so much we did take pictures of because it just wasn't, you didn't want to kind of play on these people's tragedy. But I will tell you, every one of these people, like this little guy, he was the coolest guy ever. He's just like, "This is the funnest trip I've ever been on." And
we would always ask too.
Mom had already lost her husband.
On the pictures, and some of them preferred not to have their picture taken, but we'd always ask. And there were sometimes you just knew not to ask because of the situation that was there.
Yeah, just kind of a wrap up of some thoughts, Paul, and I know you had some thoughts too as well. I would just share with you. It was the most interesting paradox that I've ever had in my life. There was this immense tragedy that was going on. And at the same time, you could not hide from the fact that you could see the hand of God in everything you did every day. Even to the place where there was a night when they were killing the GPS system, and I was hopelessly lost. I had absolutely no idea where I was, and I had absolutely no idea how to get home. And I had no GPS system. And it's the middle of the night. And my wife is a witness to this event. Because I called her and I'm like, "I'm so lost and I have no idea how to get home tonight." And having seen miracle after miracle every day of finding people that were lost, I turned my own heart to Heavenly Father and I said, "Father, tonight I am lost. I have no idea where I am." A few moments later, I said to my wife who's on the phone with me, I'm like, "I'm just going to drive. I may end up in Prague. I have no idea where I'm going. I'm just going to follow what I feel right now." And you felt so loved. It was just, I've never had that kind of immense feeling around me before. I just felt so protected. And I was like, "Sweetheart, I feel like I know where I need to go. I don't know how to explain that, but I'm just going to keep driving." I drove this way. I was 53 minutes from home. I knew that because my GPS, before it died, said I was 53 minutes from my hotel room. And keep in mind, these hotel rooms weren't like big hotels. It wasn't like the Marriott. It was a door in a building. That was where we stayed, like a hostel kind of a thing. So I'm turning left, I'm turning right, I was backing up, I was going down alleyways, and at some point I said to my wife, she's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Sweetheart, I can feel it. I know where I'm going. I'm just going to keep following what I feel." And I could tell, I come to a road and be like, "Right or left?" And I'd be like, "Go right." And you just felt it. You knew left was not the right way. So you can imagine my astonishment when about 25 minutes into this 53-minute drive, I turn a corner, and 50 feet down the road, out the left side of my window, is the door to my hotel room. And I sat and just wept. I felt so humbled to have been a witness to what had just happened in my life. It's hard to explain that. And to have been a witness of just the majesty of that whole thing. It was so far from chance. It was so far, all these things were just so majestic that I left there with a commitment in my heart that I will never again go a day without finding somebody I could do something kind for. Because the blessings associated with it were so immense. The peace associated was so immense. If you ever question there's a God or not, just go the next 5 days and do something kind for somebody. Just try it. And call me and tell me if the windows of heaven don't open up in your life. There's something special. And in the midst of all this tragedy, Heavenly Father knew these women and knew these children. And I just felt honored to have been a person that could go and witness the beauty of the other side of the tragedy. And for that, I'll be eternally grateful. And to each of you, I know there's a handful of you here that are folks that have donated to what we're doing. I just wish so badly I could get you to go and just take the hugs of the people we got hugs from. I wish you could sit in a car and talk to these families. It's an amazing thing. And, you know, Paul, you had the same experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I'm listening to Will, you know, have you ever taken a picture of a beautiful sunset or a waterfall or amazing scenery, and you're excited to share it with your family or friends, and you go to show them this picture and you're like, well, that's a good picture, but it doesn't fully explain what it was that I saw. It was so much more beautiful than this. And I would say that's what Will and I experienced serving these people in Ukraine. We can try and use the English language to express what we experienced and what we saw and what we were part of, but it's like that picture. It gives you maybe a high-level view of what took place, but you communicate with the heart there mostly, because you don't speak the language, and Google Translate helps. But most of the communication is through the heart, and it's really hard to describe that. But as Will said, I know I was part of miracles, and that's what makes it so special. You see people that are in such tragedy, and some people will ask, is there a God, or why would God allow this? But it's at these times of tragedy that you see the most miracles taking place. And these people, although they don't want to leave their spouses and don't want to leave their children, but they come across and they're joyful and they're excited for safety, and they share with you their experiences. And after watching the news the last 2 days of what we've seen as some of these cities have been liberated by Ukraine's army, the stories that they were telling me now make so much more sense. Because as they were even telling me them, I couldn't fathom in my mind. I just knew it was really bad. And now I see these cities, and I see these men and these women that are bound and shot in the mouth and shot in the back of the head, and I see bicyclists going down the road and they're shot, and I'm told this, and I'm like, okay, there's got to be something wrong with the translation, because this doesn't make sense. And now it makes perfect sense what they were describing to me, but yet there's still miracles that are taking place, and it's a privilege to be part of that process and to be used as a tool to help these people.
We need your help. We need everybody's help. And sure, Bill, yes.
A few people were asking some questions on the dynamics of the ethnicities of the people and how they're sort of connected between the Russians and the Ukrainians, and you hear about the Belarus. So it's a Slavic race, so the Polacks, the Czechs, Slovakians, Ukrainians, Russians, basically you wouldn't be able to tell the difference if you saw them on the street. They look alike. Very proud, very hardworking people, not coming into countries. Hopefully one day the United States is going to allow some of them to come in to milk the system, to work off the social systems, the medical care system. These are hardworking people. And with Israeli connection, there's about 100,000 to 200,000 Jews in Ukraine. You probably know Zelensky is a Jew. So the Jews felt very, very safe. So if you're hearing stuff in the news about the Nazi connection and why Putin is liberating Ukraine from the Nazis, that's propaganda. Don't listen to that. They were very, very safe in Ukraine. And Israel stepped in the 70s and 80s and 90s when Jimmy Carter made some deals to get the Russian Jews out of the Soviet Union in exchange for some food. Israel did the same thing now, where they started taking some of the Jewish Ukrainians into Israel. You're talking about the Snake Island and that famous line. So the Russian curse is very rich. It's not just the FU that's in English. Russians can write a novel in cursive. And it is so beautiful and melodic when you listen to it. They literally can write a book. So what those guys said on Snake Island that went viral is an amazing statement. I can't repeat it obviously here, but when the Russians tell other Russians what to do with themselves, it's fascinating. It's not just the FU. There's just a lot of stuff that they say. So I can understand your problems with Google Translate.
Yeah, they invite them to do it with honor, don't they? But to that point tonight, how can you help? We need to keep the message alive. It's going to get quieter as this goes on and drags out. People get tired of what they could kind of hear. It's only getting more desperate at the border right now. The Prime Minister, Minister of somebody today said that in areas of, for the first time, that people need to get out. He says, all the people in this area, you've all got to get out. And they're now telling the people to get out, which they hadn't in the past. So you're going to see a whole new set of refugees coming out. Yeah.
How long were you over there, and are you planning to go back?
Yeah, so we have team 4 there now. I was there as team 1, Paul went as team 2. We now have team 4 going in on Friday, and we're just going to keep getting volunteers and keep going until there's not a need. And in fact, our next level of this is we're already beginning to plan on how we can get people to go back and help rebuild. At some point, they're going to need some rebuilding, and I know there's a massively armies of people we've already met over there. We're all coordinating about going back and raising funds to help rebuild at some point because they'll need to rebuild their home. But I'm right now trying to do some logistics things from here. We're trying to get flak jackets and bulletproof vests and other things that we've been asked by people to try to get into Ukraine. And the other team is there now running it, and so we'll just keep cycle. Both Paul and I are just gonna, the next cycle we go in and so I may be back there on Friday. I may be back there for a couple of weeks. We don't know yet. It may be 3 months before I go back. We're just checking the temperature and the amount of talent we have on the ground and resources we have on the ground. But
and the need.
Well. So you can help by donating to any cause that you believe in. Any cause you believe in that can help out. We have the one that the radio station put up for us, sandhillrescue.com, and we appreciate everybody that's here tonight that had donated to that. All that money went directly on the ground. It went for feeding children, and it went for hotels, and it went to all those people.
Train tickets.
Those are our family now. Yes.
Do you plan on having any more of these events?
Yeah.
What you do is a way to publicize it so more people know about it. We just heard about it from word of mouth from our business.
Yeah, that's up to you guys. If we want to start a brigade and start getting on Facebook and start making the notice and getting people to organize around it, look, that's all we want to do. We started with just 2 of us, and it started into 5, and then turned into 18, and now we got 56 people on the ground, and now we got a room full of people we're talking to as well, and we got Fox News talking about what we're doing. And it's going to keep growing because I know every one of you that are here tonight care, and there's 10,000 more in town that are just wanting to do something to help. We just need to organize them. We need to let them know we're available, and we can have training meetings. And even on that website, if you go up to sandhillrescue.com, there's a place to put your name down if you want to volunteer to go be a driver. If you can fly yourself there so we can save the money for the refugees, then we invite all good people to join us. At the right time, by the way. Every season's a little different, and there's seasons when it may not be right for you to be there. And we understand that, and you have to be fiercely independent right now because there's not a lot of structure. Yeah.
I heard on the news that America gave them like billions of dollars in aid. Is that what
They're claiming they'll get $2 billion in aid. I hope they do. I don't know what that means.
any of the aid?
No. We didn't see any of that kind of stuff.
That was one thing I was going to say about this. I think Will nailed it. Whatever cause that you're most familiar with or that you trust and believe in, I think is a great cause. One thing that I like about this is sometimes those big causes, Red Cross or some of these other ones, like Will said, I never saw them there. I saw them on the news for the first time last night going into some of these cities that just got liberated. That's the first sign of the Red Cross that I've ever seen. But with the refugees, I never saw them there. But one thing that I can say is the money that's gone to this has gone straight to the refugees. It's a direct. This isn't a big organization. This is grassroots, just small. Our community here in Idaho Falls, and it goes to gas, to hotel rooms, to train tickets, bus tickets, and some luggage, and that's.
And then anything else they need.
Yeah.
Anything else they need. Or I'll with it. Yes.
Do you know if the Russian citizens are in agreement with their government, what they're doing?
Yeah, that's a travesty there. We have some relationships. The question was, are the Russian people in agreement with what's going on? It is amazing what happens in that country with the propaganda. You talk to some people in Russia, and they think we're all a bunch of crazies, and they've been staging all this stuff. And you'll see them say, our military are honorable. My son would never shoot somebody in the head. And then somebody produces video of their son shooting a lady in the head. You know, it's like, really? Your son, Mr. Honorable? And so you can't hide from the video. The news can do certain things, but when we were seeing the video come out early from the people that were living there, the thing that we have this time we've never seen before is everybody has a phone. And there's video of a lot of this stuff. And it's nobody from Ukraine doing it. I've seen video of Russian soldiers mowing down innocent people, cars that say children, and they go to the back seat and shoot it all up. I've seen video of it.
All of the Russian people don't believe it though, because there
You're
are
right.
protests going on.
Yep.
And there you said Russian resistance, so it is good that there are some people that aren't buying into the propaganda.
And outside of it, we have a family member, there was a friend that called over and said, okay, something's wrong here. McDonald's is closed, we can't get any rubles, we can't use Visa, we're hearing that we're getting flowers and wine from the people of Ukraine for liberating them. Something's not right in this picture. So there's a lot of that goes on. But to that point, you see a lot of those people being quickly arrested, taken off the street. And so it's, one of the things interesting, I think it's probably fair to share, I've never had a Ukrainian say anything negative about the Russian people. Not one. In fact, they would tell you that we believe that the Russian people are good people. They have a wicked government. And that says a lot. I think that's completely true. But as a nutshell, it's amazing the propaganda and how people can fall for stuff. You're like, it's right here. It's a video. There's your son with a gun in the lady's head. You can't tell me it's happening, right? You can't make that stuff up. But it's true. More questions? Yes?
I had two. One was, do you have some kind of a blog or something that could be checked, maybe through Sandhill or otherwise, to try to keep up from a grassroots level?
Yeah. You know, unfortunately, we've been horrible at making, we haven't, we're not into the Facebook, Twitter thing. We didn't have time. Honestly, I was 24/7 trying to get hotel rooms and people at border. But that's coming along. We've got, in fact, maybe something you could volunteer to do. If you're very good at that kind of stuff, we can feed you the data. And that's what we're looking for. Just the army of people that can help in any way we can keep the message going, keep the truth out, and then help relieve the people that are coming back. You can only be there for a couple weeks, as you can tell. It is emotionally incredibly difficult. And at the same token, it is the most tenderest thing. And so that paradox will really bust you up. And you gotta be able to go without sleep and things like that, yeah.
Are their cell phones going to keep working? I mean, are they going to get cut off from those?
Yes, so in the Ukraine, when they get across the border, that was a problem because people lose their phones. They get into the Polish system and their phones wouldn't work anymore. Many of them, though, had dead phones. Keep in mind, they've been walking for days and stuff. So there were a lot of stranded people with no phones. The Polish government did start giving people SIM cards, and they tried to help people get their phones charged and things like that. But that's a difficult issue over there, is that when you change every border, it changes the cell service. And so all of a sudden you had contact with your family, and now you don't. And you're hopeless at trying to get a hold of them. Yeah, so that's why our international phones became, I blew up hundreds and hundreds of hours. Because we just give them our phone and say, call your husband, call your family. You know, connect them to my phone. We put a Google tracker on it, and they could track my phone. Whatever we could do. Yeah, see, it's hard to imagine if you lost your phone, lost your wallet, didn't have any money that worked. You're now out of diapers. You've got 3 children. You only have things in a baggie. You're going into a country that doesn't speak your language. You've got to try to negotiate your way around to somewhere to find some place to live. Then you got to try to find a job, nobody there to watch your kids. I mean, just track the system down, and it just magnifies just how tragic this is to innocent people. Just tragic in so many ways. And yet, they're the most bold people, the most wonderful, giving, kind, complimentary people I've ever been around. Yes?
Do you know what's happening to the orphan children?
No, the first night I said I saw this bus come through, and it was just filled with children, and that was shocking to me. I was like, "Where's the parents?" And then another bus came by full of children, and they apparently the parents have somewhere the kids are supposed to go, and they get them to staging places, but they're just trying to get the children out of the country so that, as they would say, so their seed would continue, because they honestly don't believe they're coming back out, and so they would send their children out, and some are going to family to pick them up, and some are going to orphanages and things like that. I don't know all the answers there yet.
When I was working the border, there were at different times, three orphanages were truly orphanages. There was 15 to 20 kids, 1 or 2 adults that were taking them out of Ukraine. And of those 3, they had made arrangements with orphanages in Poland, 2 in Poland, 1 in Germany, that they were going to, and in their mind it was temporary. They were hoping to go back to Ukraine. But there was those 3 orphanages, because I saw all these kids and I thought, oh, this is an opportunity. And then I got looking around and I'm like, there's no parents here. And noticed the adults that were with them. And it was tough. The one orphanage, it took them 3 times to get through border control, because issues with travel documents and so forth. And being orphanages, most of them didn't have travel documents. And those border control agents, I tried to make friends with them, and I did pretty good on the Polish side, and I made friends with a couple on the Ukraine side, but most of them are pretty stern, and they would yell at people, and it was tough. You'd see these kids have no idea what was going on and have no idea where they were going. But I saw those 3 orphanages while I was working the border, but they were going to other orphanages in Poland and Germany.
Thoughts, feelings? Thank you for joining us tonight. Yes, one more. Couple more. Yeah. And your accent, are you from Ukraine? Well, yeah. Yes. The Americans would welcome him with open arms. Our government is locking the door on us right now. And I know, Bill, you've been trying to find out how to do it.
Yeah, I've been on the phone with Senator Crapo and Risch. Crapo is useless. Risch's office called back. They're waiting for the State Department to give them some indication of what paperwork is needed for the embassy in Poland or Czech Republic to get these people in. I offered to fly there, pick them up, put them on a plane, and bring them in. They cannot come in because they need a special refugee visa. There's been a number of Ukrainian families getting in through the Mexican border, interestingly enough.
That's been the easiest way to get in. They go to Mexico and come across Tijuana.
Yeah, they're waiting to get something from the State Department on paper.
Yep. And the trafficking problem is an issue down there as well, right? The same problem. So
I'm trying to help.
Bless your heart. Let's talk afterwards. And I know I have been asked by numerous people, everyone here is welcome to take a family. And I know there's not, we could bring 100,000 of them just into this town, and people welcome with open arms. It's our government that won't let them cross the border right now, and we don't understand why. All the European governments do. You can walk right in. So you're thinking, walk right in, no questions asked?
I didn't know Bill was working on this, but I've been trying to work on it too, because I know some people were trying to come over. And so if you listen to the Neil Larson show, Senator Crapo was on this morning, and I hurried and texted Neil and said, hey, if you got time, ask him a question about refugee status, because the media and our government has done a great job saying we're opening our borders to 100,000 refugees.
There's nothing.
But there's nothing. And if you heard Crapo's response this morning, it wasn't impressive at all. And then he said he would have his office reach out to me. And I took two car warranty calls today, just hoping it was someone from his office where I normally wouldn't answer them. But I thought this could be Crapo's office because he said they were going to reach out to me on the show this morning. So I took the calls, but
start making noise.
I haven't heard from them, so we'll have to work together on that too. But
we the people, we don't need them. The government, seriously, I get it in this case, but at some point, there were times I was embarrassed to be an American, and it's the Ukrainians that said, it's okay, we understand your government, but all the people that have helped me today are Americans, and we love you. And I know that what you've done here is because all these people, I can't tell you how many times I tell somebody, by the way, this help came from friends of mine back in my hometown. And they would say, you know, they'd give you a kiss or a hug, and they'd say, please give that person a kiss or a hug. So if you've donated anything you want a kiss from me, I'm happy to pass it. I'm happy to pass it on. The hugs are a little warmer than you may want to have. They're really tight. They are very loving people that way. Yes?
I would recommend that if there's people there on the ground helping, that somebody have the job of following those buses with no adults in it and only children, because I believe that there are a lot of orphanages that are covered for that trafficking.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
It's sad. I was working the borders the first day I went over, and there was a girl sitting in a van, and I felt sick when I walked past the van. And as I went back, I looked over my shoulder, and there was a bar that went over the back doors from the outside, so you couldn't open the doors from the inside. And it sickened me. So it's happening. Like I said, when people turn you down, it's almost like they're going to be okay, because they're going to turn everybody down, and they're eventually going to get not as easy pathway as what we can provide them, but they're going to get where they need to go, because they're turning everybody down, because it's happening, it's real.
Yeah. Another question, yes?
What was that website you said?
Live UA. So UA is the abbreviation for Ukraine. So liveuamap.com.
Yeah. Question?
Yeah, how are the people, is there a plan for people to find their family afterwards, their kids? You talked about those families leaving and going back.
Yeah.
Is there a way for a plan to reunite?
We sure hope so.
If they died?
Yeah, we sure hope so. I mean, we don't. It's such a mass movement right now. You only hope the families are staying in charge. I don't know. We took track of a lot of people we have. We try to get them to be friends on like Facebook, so we can have a way to talk to them and follow them, make sure they got where they're supposed to go. And we started doing paperwork on people just to keep track. We give them our paperwork to stay in contact with us, just to be resources going forward. But as a mass, I mean, you're talking. This is like all of Utah just got sent out, and they're living in Idaho Falls right now. That's what we're up against. All of Utah, and half the houses in Utah are gone. And only people that came were the women and children. And they're sitting in Idaho Falls right now. It's massive. It's hard to keep track of. Anyways, thank you. You take one more question. Yeah, sometimes we could. We got a few college students that were Ukrainian that had been across the border that joined us in the initial band that we had, a group. And these people were priceless. It's a young girl and a young guy and a friend. And anytime we could get them in a van, we would take them with us because they were priceless in talking to people because they spoke the language. And then we have people like Bill who's volunteered. They have, all our drivers have his phone number. If they get in a bind, they get him on the phone, or any of the other people that have volunteered. If you know anybody that speaks Russian or Ukrainian and they're good nature, well, we invite them to come join us because it was a big deal if you could speak the language.
The women volunteers, is that what you said? Yeah. Like I had a friend reach out to me yesterday, and they had a son that served a mission in Ukraine. And they and their son and his wife are going over, and I'm like, you guys are perfect because John can drive. I said, your wife, Allison, will be able to communicate and gain trust a lot faster than anyone else, and your son speaks Ukrainian, so he can communicate. But for me, I tried to not have another person in my van with me unless they were a translator, because it's a seat. It takes a seat, and I'd rather have. And I told my wife, I'm like, I always said you would have hated being there, because I'm driving 170 kilometers down the highway and using Google Translate and showing it to them, and they're doing it back. And so I was breaking every rule there is out there, and you just kind of hope you have enough faith that you'll get to where you need to go.
Nobody fell asleep at the wheel, no gun or wreck. We've just been hugely blessed. And again, your days of exhaustion, and then you get in your drive and you're just like wide awake. You just found a way to make it work. Thank you again for being here, everyone. And please help wherever you can help. We would love to have you come help us at whatever level you can. If not, just do something. Try to do something that can reach out. Everybody can have a place they can help. Even if it's putting a blog up and doing some Facebook posts to keep the message alive or the campaign going. We're just going to keep going until we run out of money. And we hope that never happens, because there's a lot of great people that can go and volunteer.
How much money has been donated?
The radio station has raised $30,000 so far. But we've used half of that already. We've used about 20 grand of that already. Just in the 4 weeks we've been there. And that's with nobody taking expenses. That's just for the refugees.
One van in fuel probably uses around $130 a day in fuel going, and that's just if you do one trip back and forth. If you do more than one, it'd probably be double that. But it's roughly what the fuel prices over there, which they're more expensive than we are, but it's not bad. It's a 2.5 hour drive one direction.
And when it comes to hotels, we're not talking about us. It's the people that that needed a place to have a shower for the night, get a hot meal. So we pick them up middle of the night. I got woken up one night after being asleep for about an hour. I had to go back out to my car to get something. And as I walked out the door, there's this lady standing there wandering around like this in the middle of nowhere. You could tell she's a refugee by the way the clothing they had on. And I'm like, "Are you okay?" And she's weeping and she says, "No, I have no place to go tonight." And I'm like, "Well then please come back and you can have my room. I'll just go into my car and you can take my little bed that they have. They're not like hotel rooms here. There's just 2 little beds and a closet. About all you have." And she says, "Well, I can't because my mother and father are coming. They're elderly and my grandmother's in a walker. And they're stuck. We can't find any place to sleep tonight." So I spent the next 2 hours calling everybody I could and found 2 hotel rooms, and $500 later, that's a pretty expensive hotel room over there, but there's only 2 left we could find. We put them up for the night, 2 nights. And that's what happened. Everywhere you turn, need everywhere. You won't be a burden. If you go over there and just go, "Hey, what can I do?" You're probably gonna be a burden. If you go over there and say, "I'm just gonna find something that is needed," then if you go independently, go. I don't think you're gonna be a burden. There's too much need. Just go and try to offer a hand. If you want to join a group like ours or anybody else's, contact them. But there's a lot you can do here too to help support the campaign. Don't be afraid of that. All right. And one other thing I would ask, and I mean this deeply from my heart. One of the best gifts you could give them is to pray for them. Just please pray for them. I know that these people are loved by our Heavenly Father. I saw it in too many ways. I believe it is effective, and I believe it's helping them and sustaining them, and many of them feel the same way. They feel very sustained. And so, if you've never prayed before, maybe tonight might be a night that would be kind for you to offer up something. And if not, maybe just a kind letter you can send with one of us, and we'd be happy to give that to them. It warms their hearts when they know that we stand with them. We stand with them. But thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. We appreciate it.
Again, gentlemen, thank you very much for all of your efforts. It's very much appreciated, and I'd just like to again say thank you, and thank you, Bill, for bringing them here. All I have to say really is if you can feel a way to support them, definitely do so. If you have trouble figuring out how to do it, contact me or Bill. We'll help you get there. So, and with that, thank you, everybody. Be safe going home, and be thankful that you have a home to go to.
Thank you for all your help. Thank you.